Well, hello again, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Kelly Gourdeau, and I'm the Director of Corporate Affairs at AMGC. And thank you very much for joining us today, which is Way 9, Build Your Workforce Culture. And this is from AMGC's 10 Ways to Succeed in Australian Manufacturing Research. So thank you again for joining us. And I will now pass you over to our host, Michael Sharp, also known as Sharpie, our National Director for Industry. Thanks very much, Sharpie. Over to you.
Thank you, Kelly. Good to be here, and glad you could all join us again today for Way 9 of the 10 Ways to Succeed in Australian Manufacturing. I'd like to kick off by stating that in the spirit of reconciliation, the AMGC acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And today I'm coming to you from Terrigal, which is on Darkinjung country, and it's good to be here with you all again. Some of you have been sending me text messages this morning because I was able to be on ABC, the overnight show, very early this morning, but talking about all things manufacturing, and there were some great encouraging signals coming from the manufacturing community. So I'm glad to know that some of you were listening in. Just a bit of housekeeping. I'd like to remind you all that today's webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to access it on the AMGC YouTube channel very shortly. Remember to submit your questions to any of our panelists throughout the session via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll be happy to ask questions of our panelists throughout the session. We will go for an hour. Remember that the report can be downloaded from the AMGC website, and let's talk about that report, because we had 30 focus groups and roundtable discussions and interviews all over Australia. And many of you met our Director for Research, Katie O'Connell, as part of those interviews, and your feedback has been valuable to add into the 10 Ways report. So 93 individuals from manufacturing companies, industry bodies, government agencies, and our great universities. These industry bodies represent approximately 370 manufacturers across the country. We also did a survey of 1,000 members of the Australian public and a survey of 1,000 students and other focus groups. Now, just at a glance, talking about Way 9, more than the skills gaps, because many of the skill gaps can be filled by developing the abilities of existing employees, and we'll talk a bit about that. We know that company culture has a big effect on employee retention, and many successful manufacturers make it a priority in their business. And we also know that a collaborative culture that prioritises communication and invites employees to speak up can make businesses more productive and even more innovative. And I know that some of our panelists will talk today about that. So over to the panel, if each of you would like to just give a bit of a wave as I introduce you. Firstly, my colleague, Darren Norman, is the industry facilitator with AMGC. And Darren joined AMGC as the industry facilitator in May earlier this year. He works closely with industry to secure Australian PPE supply chains, and we talked about the COVID-19 manufacturers' response. Darren has served for over 30 years as an engineer in the Australian Army. His roles included a range of leadership, military engineering and infrastructure management appointments, including command of the Army's 19th Chief Engineer Works. He had exchange postings with the RAAF, the US Army Corps of Engineers, and the UK Ministry of Defence. In his last appointment with Defence, he managed the National Defence Capital Infrastructure Program. I'm glad you could join us, Darren. Pete Zaglinski is the CEO and co-founder of the Seabin Project. And if you haven't had a chance yet, I'd highly recommend you look at the Seabin Project Facebook page and website, because Pete's got a lot of great work going on, which I know we'll talk about. Pete is the CEO and co-founder at Seabin Project, which is far more than a product. Their ultimate goal is to have pollution-free oceans for our future generations. And along with the development of the project, Pete is involved in the technical design and the development of the products. Welcome, Pete. And finally, Chris Bridges-Taylor is the Executive Director at B&R Enclosures, a supplier of an extensive range of products, standard and custom-built enclosures, data racks and cabinets for residential, industrial, mining, data and so much more. B&R is a family business started by Chris's father over 60 years ago and employs over 300 people across 4 countries. After 25 years running B&R with her brother, Chris is moving her focus to the family office, which is Bridges Capital Ventures, while still supporting members of the third generation taking up leadership of the business. So glad you could join us today, Chris, and welcome. Now, if we get stuck into the report here, I've got it here with me. And again, you can download the report from the AMGC website. I know a lot of you have done that because a couple of you were talking to me on the weekend, how you've been replaying the YouTube channel over and over and taking notes. So I certainly encourage that, and so glad that you can get involved. And as always, feel free to reach out to me or my colleagues, and we're happy to offer any guidance or assistance. But Darren, I thought I might start with you because we often talk about the positives of the culture in a workforce, but there's always the other side of that too. Maybe some things that are not so positive. And what would you need to do in a situation like that to perhaps bolster the culture or look at turning it around? What's some of your experiences from your time, and how would you talk to people about that?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Look, I think probably the first thing I'd say to that is that culture is set from the top of an organisation, and it's very important that the leadership of an organisation understands what type of culture they want the organisation to have, how they want the people in their organisation to act. A simple definition of culture is, the way we go to work. So it's, what do we do when we're in the workplace? How do we interact with each other? What are our norms? What are our biases, and so on? And I think, in my experience, culture develops over time, and if it's not carefully managed, there is the potential that it could go off track or potentially not be where you want it to be as a leader. So if you think there's a need to change the culture, then you need to, as a leader, you really need to understand, well, why? Why is it that you might want to change? And then changing culture, I think it's important for everyone to realise is not something that can be done just by flicking a switch or directing that, as of tomorrow we're going to act this way, not that way. Mm-hmm. It needs a long-term investment. It needs commitment, and you have to be prepared to resource any activity associated with changing corporate culture, because the barriers to change are quite significant, or can be quite significant. So in my experience, the first thing you have to do is you've got to understand what your current culture is, and that's not as simple as you might think, because you'll always come at it from inside the organisation. You'll come at it from your own particular perspective, and what you believe the culture of the organisation to be might be very different to someone down in the trenches, if I use the military term, at the bottom end of the hierarchy, or your customers or the stakeholders that you deal with on a daily basis, your supply chain, and so on. They all have their own view of your culture. So in order to set out on that path, you've got to define what your current organisational culture is. You need to engage with all of those groups to assess, well, where are we? The next step then is to assess, well, are we happy with that, or do we need to change it? And if you need to change it, then saying, okay, well, what do we want to change it to? Now, again, the leadership sets the culture, but again, you can't just sit in the glass castle and look down upon the masses and say, this is what we will be. Setting the organisational culture is something that needs to be undertaken in conjunction with your staff and with your leadership at all levels, because ultimately you need everyone to buy in. So you need to define.
How do you go about setting that open
objective is? Sorry, mate, go on.
I was just going to say, how do you go about setting up that open communication? Because it's not just about sending out a group email, right? You need to have that.
No, it's more than that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, you could try it by group email, but the effectiveness may not be what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So there's the old terminology of management by walking around, and take a walk down through the organisation and talk to people, and look around the environment. How are people interacting with each other? Does there appear to be social interaction with people, or is it all purely work-based? Do people seem happy working there? Try and assess the level of morale in the organisation. A good indicator is on people's desks? Do they have family photos and knickknacks and things like that sitting on the desk? Do they feel comfortable in the organisation to be able to display personal items? And probably a key one, which oftentimes you may not see firsthand, is how do people resolve conflict in the organisation?
Mm-hmm.
And for a start, is conflict encouraged? And by that I mean, positive conflict that leads to innovation and disruption, or is it discouraged, or is it dealt with harshly? And I think that's a strong indicator of the health of a corporate culture. And I'm sure the other panelists will have ideas on that, but perhaps I might just quickly finish that. How you go about changing it. And there's plenty of articles out there by people who are much more learned and experienced than I in doing this. But in my experience, you just got to set the objective. You've got to get leadership agreement that that's where you want to go. You've then got to sell that to your people. And before embarking on this, you need the leadership to understand this has to have a sense of urgency and priority. Because if you don't, it's hard and it will fall off your priority list. So you've got to realise that you've got to be committed to it and be willing to work it through to conclusion.
Right.
You need to identify the people in the organisation who are ready to change, and you've got to empower them as change agents and change champions. And then you've also got to be perhaps you need to identify the change disruptors, the people who will try and stop the change, who are wedded to their old ways of doing business.
Yeah, it's always been done this way.
Encourage them to see the benefit of the change, and that's part of the job of communicating and selling the need for the change. Is people need to understand, well, what's in it for them, what's in it for the organisation, what part do they have to play, and even with all of that, you will still have the occasional person who just is unwilling to change. And in that instance, you can either go around them and isolate them, or if that doesn't work, then, sometimes it comes to you need to separate them in some form. And,
Sure.
And ultimately, obviously you don't want to take that step as the first step, but I think leadership needs to be honest with itself that sometimes harsh or hard decisions like that will need to be taken.
Yeah.
And then, and probably the last point I'd say on that, and there's, as I say, there's a lot has been written about this, but the leaders need to walk the talk. So, so not only setting what's required, but then acting on that and exhibiting that every day, every moment of the day, in the way that they interact, not only with each other, but also with their staff, with their subordinates, all the way down the chain, plus also how they interact with your outsiders, your stakeholders, your customers, and so on. And if the leadership aren't exhibiting those traits on a daily basis, then how can you expect your staff to follow?
You've got to live it and breathe it. And it's a great privilege of mine to go around the country and, walk the factory floors and meet our members. And pretty much you would experience, as soon as you walk in the door, you can tell what the culture is like and how the business is performing. And I think it's vitally important. But Pete, if we get to you, and you might just tell us a bit about Seabin and the latest works going on. But culture is so much more than just internal. At Seabin Project, you're developing a global culture around all that can be achieved. Could you tell us a bit of the highlights of your latest works?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good to be clear now that we didn't have a set strategy of what we're doing. We didn't know we were going to create a culture or a following or a community. We just set out to do the right thing and being honest, as honest as we could, and just stay true to ourselves. And then then we're still pretty young. We started in 2016, but we have been kicking a few goals and been supported, and basically we're a company now we're for profit and we are community driven. So it's a very organic journey that is as much personal development as professional development for me.
Sure. Well, even around the fundraising, the capital raising you did recently, could you give us some highlights about that? Because for me, that was a lot around broadcasting the culture at Seabin so that people could look at say, well, I'd like to invest in that company. And that was highly successful when you consider that you did that just as the pandemic was hitting. It's quite a year for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a equity crowdsource funding campaign, which started in March, I think it was.
Amazing.
And then 5 days later, COVID devastated the entire, stock markets globally, Australia, everywhere. Just totally smashed it. We in our first, to even get to the equity crowdfunding, a few years ago, we identified that we're a high risk startup, that traditional investment, investors, impact investors, venture capitalists see us as high risk. We have a niche market. We're only just starting to get traction, and to get around this issue of finding capital and working capital and just money to support the scaling, we realized that we've always had a connection with communities around the world that put a priority on the environment and environmental concerns. And we didn't know, nobody knew COVID was happening, and so we embarked on this mission where we could get around the issue of venture capital or lack of venture capital to go for crowdsourced funding. And we were aiming to raise 3 million, and we were aiming to have 3,000 investors. So we're looking at around an average of $1,000 each.
Yep.
We set the buy-in to $250 for the reason that if you lose $250, if this thing goes belly up, hopefully you're not going to lose the house. And we've never kicked goals going for big things. We've always kicked goals going for little things, and that's been adding up. And so in the first week, just before COVID hit, we raised $1 million in 4 days.
It was exciting to watch.
It was crazy. It was an emotional roller coaster, and
Sure.
It still is. And then COVID hit on day 5. Entire stock markets, went through the roof, and then the next day they went through the floor, and then that continued to happen, and just everything died off. We got this amazing, head start, and then over the next 4 weeks we raised another $720,000, and so we finished a 4-week campaign during COVID with $1.82 million raised, and then we lost $100,000 post-raise, just because people were losing jobs, people couldn't afford things, they had to move out of their houses. And but as we did our raise, and for each person that pledged shares, we had a questionnaire saying, how do you rate the environment, and everyone put it above pandemics, even though people are dying, and we're being just full havoc.
Yep.
Because people saw pandemics as hopefully short term, and the environment as long term to sustain us all. So,
but throughout that, I was following all your social media campaign, and I know you were doing even the TV interviews and so much more. It was, as I mentioned, it was exciting to follow the work you were doing. But that's part of our report here. That way 9 around workforce and culture is communications. And so I think through your efforts, you were communicating to your team as much as you were to the outside investment community of the culture that you're creating at Seabin. And so I was wondering, how has that campaign impacted on your team members? There seemed to be a lot of enthusiasm.
Yeah, we when we did our offer document, I think it's something like 56 pages of information and allocation of funds, and we didn't factor in any working capital, because we had we had sales and we had ongoing revenue, and then this was to scale up and invest in new tech and all sorts of stuff. And so there was a moment where it was like, oh God, markets are shutting down. What happens to the sales? What happens to the money raised? And, as a team, we kind of set the agenda that we're just going to plunge on, and, we're just going to go ahead as if COVID hasn't happened, because there was two scenarios. Scenario one was we could bunker down, use the money to ride out the storm, but you would come out the other end at the same place you started, less obviously the capital. Or the second scenario was we could just plunge on, take a calculated risk, come out the other side, with assets and, new product and really scaled up and gone for it.
Yep.
And, so we set a 6-month mark. We'll review the company and how we're going, and it's all paying off. So, we just said to the employees, everybody, like, hey, this is the idea. Are you cool with it? We're not fortune tellers, but we can definitely go with a calculated risk, and we can go out fighting if it goes belly up. So,
yep. Now, we're never going to forget 2020, that's for sure. It's not over yet, but I think what you've achieved is a credit to your leadership in particular, because, as I say, I've been following your work, and we've been talking on several occasions with the AMGC project now up and running, which is terrific. So, congratulations on that. But if I go to Chris, you're at the other scale, I guess, long established family business. You might just tell us a bit about the family. Is it third generation now at B&R?
Yes, the third generation are taking the leadership reins as we speak, and we've even got one of the fourth generation who's joined us in doing an apprenticeship. And we run a family office and family council, so work to create an environment that there's surety as best we can, in these uncertain times.
So that culture's then built up over the decades, isn't it? So people must have expectations.
Sure has. I'm just grateful I've got a good hairdresser and I haven't got the grey hairs for the years in the game. And I was just thinking, because we actually have got value statements and corporate fundamentals that were formalised back in '95. So you're talking about 40 years into our business, second generations, starting to get the run on the business, and we started to do formal strategy processes every 5 years. So even in the first one, working with a consultant, they said, we'll work on your value statement, and we thought, oh yeah. But so we did this as a large group, from people in all levels of management and people from our workshops and operations, and did the process of saying what was important to us and express that in values in '95, which has got the basics, focus on our customers, obsession with quality, be enthusiastic in our actions, act as a united team, and always be ethical. I mean, they're not rocket science.
Sure.
But and then we've got a process of every 6 months doing a formal presentation update to all our staff, as well as monthly updates. But it got us into the habit, and on many of those occasions, you never lose the opportunity just to put up your value statement and run through that and cite it off. And the way that we use it is that you choose to work at B&R. It's not compulsory. And while you're here, these are the things that we expect of each other. We embrace diversity. We have a very mixed workforce, which is great because it brings a whole range of skills and experiences. And it certainly has helped us as we've moved from being Australian-based to having overseas operations. But you need something to glue your focus together, and then that's expressed through your culture.
So you're dealing with hundreds of staff, so hundreds of people. How have you seen it change over the decades that you've been involved with the company about getting that story out or communicating with so many people? What's some of the key drivers there to talk to that much of a cohort?
Well, I think being purposeful, it doesn't happen by luck. And also being aware that your actions speak louder than your words.
Yep.
So when you're in the leadership role, appreciating that to always be on 24/7, to be living the values, so that when you put them up, they're not, your staff aren't saying, well, that's not us.
Yep.
So that's important.
You got to live and breathe it.
You got to live and breathe it. And look, with those values, it's pretty easy. You're in business, and we just delight looking after our customers. I mean, our business is about, it started making enclosures, but it's really about solving the problem when you've got equipment and wires and people coming together. Yep. And so we're really helping our customers, because people buy our product and our services to put their gear inside it. And they do that not only to look after their gear, but for safety of those, when the installer's working with it, making sure that that's all safe. And then when it's in situ, that people are safe around it. So, our real focus. So we really love doing that. We love being easy to deal with, because I find it hard to believe, but enclosures aren't top of mind of everyone's. But we've made a specialist to say, being the expert, and say it doesn't matter whether it's residential, doesn't matter whether it's industrial, or whether it's data. If you've got equipment, you've got people, you've got wires, you've got a problem, or you've got to do it. Who do you call? Just call B&R, because we're the experts. And being a family business, we're here for the long term, and so is our product. So there's consistency of the brand.
Yep.
So it's once you get into the swing of it, it's not that hard. But it is purposeful.
Sure.
And I think, Sharpie, if I may, I think one of the things that really then does demonstrate leadership commitment to it is the rewards structure within the company. So, how do you reward success? How do you celebrate success? So, people exhibiting the right behaviours are acknowledged and recognised. And I think we often forget that about, reinforcing the positives.
Yep.
We often focus on the negatives, but really, concentrating on the positives as well, I think is very important.
Yeah, and I think there's expectations when you're talking about a multi-generational family business that's been going for decades. Those expectations are set just that much higher, aren't they? So, and people are watching. So I think it's vitally important. But Pete, we've got some questions coming through here. So please feel free to keep sending those questions, and I'll get a few of them underway now. Pete, this is from Tyson. From what I know, your organisation has experienced rapid growth across many markets. How do you instill local business culture across multiple regions? So how do you go about that as you're growing the business?
Our greatest challenge wasn't developing technology. Our greatest challenge is scaling and then replicating, land and expanding. And then what quickly follows under that is we've developed an accidental brand, and so there is expectation attached now to a logo, and it's definitely something that we're very conscious of. We haven't had a lot of control of in the last 3 years. However, because of our social media and the communications presence, we've been attracting the right people to us. And the people that have been attracted to us, they have environment again as a priority. And thankfully, a lot of those people just turn out to be really nice people, genuine and, professional. And so the brand has kind of filtered that for us. But at the same time, it does start with myself and the other directors, and, how we operate as people as much as professionals. And we've just kind of, I guess we're now looking at how do we instill that, throughout our entire network. So, that's a good question. I've never been asked, and something that we're currently addressing.
Yeah, no, I think it's working. And to me, one of the points we have here in the report is that it says to be transparent and consistent. And I think with anything we do in business, consistency must be a key driver, right? Because then those expectations are there. If they're held high, well, other people will respect those positions. So I think you're certainly doing that with Seabin from every angle that I see of what the company's achieving. I think it's really setting the path, which is terrific. But I think I think you could expand on that too, Pete, because there's also commercial outcomes to having a great culture, isn't there? Your customers are aware of the culture you're creating. You're working with a lot of the local government councils to roll out Seabins in various places. So they must value the culture that's being created at Seabin.
Yeah, absolutely. We never factored in the power of social media until we started to see it firsthand, which was we would have senior management or senior officials from state and federal government emailing and calling us because their children had seen videos on Facebook that directly related to their department. So if it was fisheries or water transport, this type of thing. And then, yeah, we just started to see patterns, and then, you know, just expanded on that and became kind of community driven without aiming for that. And so now, you know, we have thousands of people in, like, up to, we operate in 53 countries, but we have thousands of people around the world that are essentially lobbying for our mission and our business agenda. And, you know, we split that into two. Well, personally, I didn't want to be a hypocrite with the messaging that went out that technology is going to save the world, because with the issue of ocean plastics and, you know, the litter in the water, if we were more responsible or smarter or better educated, we wouldn't have the issue. And so, you know, just by being transparent about that message created, you know, this entire support network for us to push our agenda.
Yep.
So,
well, I think it's an important part because, you know, you're creating that culture in the business, which is terrific, and you can create a safer working environment and all the rest that goes with it. But all of that has a bottom line impact, which is, you know, that's good for business. So we've got other questions here too. So this one, I'll point to you, Chris. It's from Janine, who says, isn't culture reflected in how procedures and processes are defined and how well that management enforces those procedures and processes? What do you think about that? It's, you know, is it more than just paperwork?
Oh, yes. The word is and. I mean, the answer to that is yes, it is reflected in what you give priority into your procedures and how you approach it. But your actions always speak louder.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. And so from Colin, it was great to catch up with you in Adelaide last week, and I look forward to all that we're going to be able to achieve together. So glad you could join us today. So Colin says, and I'll point this to you, Darren, sometimes when the boss or the person next up the ladder joins a meeting, the dynamics change a lot. And we do see that, don't we? Including silence, deferring, finger pointing, point scoring, and all the rest. Are the different types of behaviour changes a good indicator of some elements of a workplace culture?
Yeah, look, I think the answer to that is yes, but the question is how do you observe it? So, you know, if you're the boss or the leader that's joining the meeting and the activities in the meeting change upon your coming into it, then, you know, you're not going to notice. But that's where you have to have a good connection down into the organisation so that you get that sort of feedback. And there's no doubt it's those sorts of actions are indicators of I won't call it bad culture, but an area of culture that perhaps needs to be addressed and tweaked. But, you know, the challenge is, as a leader, is to be able to be aware of that.
So in the report, Darren, one of our members from Western Australia says, yes, things will fail, but you have to be in a position that people can feel that they can try things.
Yeah. And you know, that again, that's your a corporate culture that encourages innovation and encourages people or wants to be innovative needs to encourage people to take risk and be accepting of risk. Now, you know, within reason, obviously, it's got to be considered risk. But if, and you know, oftentimes you hear the public services accused of this, of being risk averse and, you know, never wanting to take a risk because they get slammed for having done it. Well, you know, you're never going to grow as an organisation if you don't do that. You have to allow people to take risks, but you can't allow it to be uncontrolled. It has to be within reason. So, you know, you empower people, but also what you need to do, and this goes back to leadership, is setting direction and setting what we'd call in the military a left and right of arc, so that says, you know, within these bounds, you're able to act and you're able to make decisions, provided you remain within these parameters. And that allows people then, and empowers people to make decisions at the lowest potential level, which is where innovation is going to come from. Innovation isn't going to come from the leadership. And I'm sure both Pete and Chris would agree with me on this. Innovation comes from below. It comes from, you know, the folks who are down there doing the work on a daily basis. They're the ones who see where there's opportunity.
Oh, sure.
Oftentimes.
So Sharpie, I'm happy to pick up on the empowerment. So I came across some years ago, good rules by a guy called Jack Daly. And he said there's five rules, so the process of empowerment is it, if you can answer 5 questions, is it right for the customer? Is it right for the company? Is it something for which I'm prepared to be accountable? Is it ethical, and is it consistent with our values and beliefs? If you can say yes to all those things, then just get on with it. And it's that drive, because behind that empowerment comes agility, that actually underpinned our drive in our digital transformation. And we're into that space because particularly the first 2 are very strongly information and decision driven. Is it right for the customer, and is it right for the company? And it's the richness of the information that you can bring to the individual to help them make that decision. And then you work with, you know, you work as a team on sharing your values of your beliefs, your views on being ethical, and then your culture of being accountable. So encouraging everyone to have a go, because doing nothing is as expensive as doing something, but getting a good understanding of what good looks like. And then when it doesn't work, you're not betting the company. You're taking small, to pick up what Pete was saying, it's doing the small steps. And when it doesn't work, everyone comes around you to learn from the experience and move on. And in that process, to make sure if you've engaged with the customer in that process, and you've got to make sure you look after them first if you've mucked them around as well.
Number one. Another point here in the report says that consider how staff fit in culturally. So getting the right team together is important. And Pete, I wanted to ask you this question, which is from Jane, who says, to build the correct culture, you need good people either on board or continually seek out those people. How do each of the panel find such intellectual capital, especially for women or traditionally different industries? What's been your experience about building the right team culture, Pete?
A roller coaster of total failure and total success. I'm a person that, you know, can multitask. I don't know, I think it was up to like 25 different projects without looking at project management or, you know, getting this and that. And then I realized it was, you know, it was actually a weakness, because, you know, you need other people to help you and support you.
Sure.
And so I've had a few really, you know, bad hires, but I've had majority absolutely amazing hires. And I don't know what the formula is, but we've never specifically, you know, sort of set out to find that person. It's just, again, people have kind of approached us with pro bono. People have volunteered their expertise, and then that has led to become part-time and then full-time positions. And definitely in the hiring process, we found that, you know, you really need to ask questions that are not so much professional, but more personal, because these are the people you spend most of your day with.
Sure, that's right.
You know, like if we have, you know, we have a 10 a.m. curfew at work here. Mornings are sacred. You can go do yoga, you can go for a swim, have a surf, no later than 10 a.m. And if you've got a meeting, you know, you need to respect that. And that builds, you know, it makes you feel good. And then you get, you know, the wrong hire that potentially takes the piss out of that and then ruins it for everyone. But yeah.
So Pete, I should point out to everyone out there that you're coming to us from Byron Bay, the head office for Seabin. So you're in the right part of the world.
Yeah, don't pigeonhole me.
No, I'm just thinking that I'll have to join you for one of those yoga sessions shortly.
Yeah, Charlie, our business guy, he can run you through that. But But yeah, look, we don't have a formula, but it's definitely asking awkward questions. One of the best questions I've asked was, you know, what's your most embarrassing life moment? And that's when you can see if this person has thick skin, can, you know, make fun at themselves, or, you know, or if you're not looking for that, like, what's their answer? Is it boring or vanilla? You know, put them in finance, or I don't know if it's a bit funny, put them in marketing. I don't know.
Well, it's all very good points. So thank you, Jane, for that question. And feel free to keep sending more. Yeah,
I think,
one of the,
sorry, Sharpie, I think there's a good connection to last week there. You know, Way 8 was hiring the right people. And one of the points that Mike Grogan made last week was we spend more time doing business cases for purchase of equipment than we do for thinking about hiring someone. And yet hiring someone will have a much longer term impact on the business. And so, you know, picking up on Pete's points there, I mean, asking those questions to try and understand whether the individual is a cultural fit is so important. And then once you've got that person as a cultural fit, then keeping them by training and developing them and showing them a career path and an opportunity for progression within the company is very important.
Yeah. And from Mark, this is for you, Pete, because Mark says, having missed the investment window for the Seabin project, is there any way of making an investment as opposed to a donation at this late stage? So people want to be involved, mate.
Yeah. We're going to set a Series B for Q1 21.
Okay.
We've got 3 big boxes to tick off before we do that. And one of them is the big AMGC Next Tech and digital transformation. And yeah, but we're 3/4 of the way through that already. So yeah, if anyone wants to find out a bit more, just follow our website or the social media, and we'll be making announcements Q1.
That's great news. So for everyone out there, just watch this space. And if you want to know more about the AMGC project with Seabin, just have a look at our website on the projects page, and you'll see the work that's underway with the great collaboration happening there as we speak. So that's great. Peter asks, what you measure, you can control and manage. How important are KPIs and leadership behaviours and having supporting and cultivating, how do you go about supporting and cultivating the company culture? What do you think about that, Chris? KPIs, how vital are they?
Essential. The challenge is to have the right KPIs and which ones to focus on, and to have them current and up to date, and to match it, and to have it cascading through your business. So yeah, no, he's on the right track there.
And do those KPIs have to be set regularly, or you know, how would you go about documenting that or communicating those KPIs?
And we find the business, and probably reflect your bottlenecks and your challenges, change over time. So sometimes we're super busy, and so our KPIs are around making sure that we get our throughput right through and give priority to that, say over cost. And then when you're not so busy, your KPIs are around building up your assets and spending your time well so that you're moving forward. So you adapt. They probably come from a common suite. Probably, I would say, spending time communicating your strategy so that in the absence of, and fits with your culture, in the absence of a specific KPI, everyone should have an idea of what direction they're going in and what good looks like, so that they know it's good even in the absence.
Sure. A couple other points from the report is that it says that we should avoid silos, you know, and uniting employees with a single vision encourages teams to work towards common goals. Changing the physical environment to encourage collaboration, and setting up workplaces to encourage regular communication helps to avoid silos. What do you think about that, Darren? You know, it's about setting that culture and getting the environment right too, hey?
Yeah, you've got to encourage that informal interaction that goes on within an organisation, and you know, we're all familiar with the old ways of working of offices. You know, we each had our own office, and we go in there and close the door and don't see anyone for the rest of the day. And those days are gone. I mean, you know, open plan work. There's a lot of things that don't work well with open plan work, but generally, I think the benefits outweigh the the failings. But if you can't have that informal interaction, if people don't feel like they can talk to each other, then you're not going to progress. I think you'll find that the organisation will just continue down its path wherever that's leading, without really trying to be innovative and trying to improve the way that it works.
Yeah, it's just an ongoing job, isn't it? Setting the culture and then monitor, working together, I guess. And Pete, you must see that across the business as it's growing so rapidly, that it's vitally important to keep communicating, and nurturing that culture, I guess, is important. I always ask our panelists if they've got any good books or podcasts they might listen to. Is there some sort of leadership books or podcasts that inspire you as we go through?
Yeah, absolutely. Ongoing is now podcasts, and my go-to is How I Built This by Guy Raz, and it's literally a warts and all verbal journey of the biggest brands and biggest names in the world, of all their failures and all their successes and the in-betweens, because what we see on social media is essentially a highlights reel, and you don't see the in the trenches and the 3 years of contractual agreement and negotiations to get to the highlight. Whereas this is it really just breaks it down and makes you feel good about your own startup journey in the trenches. And and then as for books, like I blatantly kind of just used How I Let My People Go Surfing by Yvonne Chouinard, who's the founder at Patagonia. And that's my man crush sort of thing. And if this guy can have $1 billion business, give back to the environment, have a really core culture with his employees, and essentially be a benchmark innovator in their in their industry, how come we can't be like that, even if we're 1/1000th of what they are? And so we quickly identified that, and then read the book and realized it was the blueprints for how to do it.
They sound like some great tips, and we'll put some links on the YouTube channel for people to click to. We'll get on that. So thanks for that. It's great advice. And some more questions coming through, which is terrific. So keep them coming. A couple here is for Chris. How do KPIs measure the employees' supportive culture? Are there particular numbers for this? I think it's more that each business would be different in the way they set their KPIs, and part of the culture would be getting the team together and setting them as a group to start with, I imagine.
Yes, yeah. I think so. One of the changes that we're seeing is a greater emphasis on internal training than we have done over the years. We always like to develop our people and have had a preference from employing from internally. But with all the change that's happening in the world and in the workplace, workforce of the future, again, being more purposeful about developing the skills of our team is where we're at the moment. And so we've got KPIs now in our production area and in other areas about how many hours they're spending on training and what kind of cross skills. So when the pandemic hit and we realised that we would have the opportunity, sales were down, we had the opportunity to address what has been a limitation to our growth, which is having skills when you're on a rapid rise in the manufacturing. So we switched to doing a lot of cross-training, and we set up a method of asking everyone, what would you like to do, and created a long list. And we're about a third way through that long list of giving opportunities to our staff. And then that's reflected as we are back on a growth phase again. To be employing mainly or filling positions internally. So that's an example of us using KPIs differently than we had in the past.
No, good tips. And it was great earlier on today, you and I were talking, you were in your own mobile Zoom studio where I normally find myself.
Following the leader.
So how quickly we've all adapted this year, and 2020, it's been amazing. but it shows that culture that we're all adopting, and we're getting used to being able to be so mobile and all the rest.
Yeah, and the working from home, I mean, that's it's been great. We've had a great experience where we were implementing the Dassault 3DX platform for running product data management system and really speeding up how we resolve technical issues. And that proved to be just at the right stage when the pandemic, that with a relatively small investment in a bit more technology to make sure our security was up to speed and our speed, that a lot more of our staff could work remotely. But then that creates the challenge of how do you manage remote workers when you're used to managing on presence? And again, the team have adapted. You know, in that case, it wasn't a top down, it's the managers at the different levels with their staff working out, well, how to make it work. And just shows how adaptable you can be when you have to be.
Yeah, for sure. And Darren, this one's from John. He says, great advice so far. And that you mentioned thinking about the reward systems. A quick tip is to keep it simple and real. People want to be treated with dignity and respect. It's amazing what the impact of a simple thank you can produce. And you don't have to have an elaborate bonus structure. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, you know, when you talk about reward structures, it's not just, you know, physical rewards. Just as you say, just that simple thank you. Those two words can go so very far when it comes to supporting your people.
Yep.
And you know, again, it's sort of a leadership thing as well, that if, you know, if as a leader you're aware of what your people are doing, I think that's good for the culture of the organisation, because they know it shows that you care.
Yep.
And I think that's very important. So, you know, a quick thank you, an acknowledgement, you know, at a team meeting if someone's done something particularly well, or there's been a good example of you know, the culture that you're trying to encourage in the organisation, then a quick acknowledgement of that in a team meeting goes a long way.
Yep.
And we often overlook that as leaders, you know, the importance and the impact of that.
Well, there's another quote here in the report which says that it is necessary to distinguish that culture fit should not be confused with how a person fits into the company on a social level. Employees with a diverse background can be great at the job you need done. Making great hires is about recognising great matches for the objectives the company needs to achieve, not who you want to have a beer with. And I think that's important, don't you think, Chris?
No, absolutely correct. And there is a lot of, you get strength by having a lot of different perspectives at the table. You can address risk better because with more perspectives you identify, you know, you don't get that problem of groupthink. So yeah, no, it's very wise words.
And good to have Fisher here with us again. So I'm glad you could join us, mate. This is a question, and Fisher says that this topic is important because it sets a company culture with goals and direction. Either the employees are pushed to be open to different options to help the company grow, or they become closed and don't support innovation. I've had those experiences in different companies where I've worked. I'm now a robotics researcher at university. Are there options to help open up community mindsets, company mindsets, for them to see benefits of working with universities for their own innovation? So I guess this comes down to collaborating with researchers, and we've got some of the best in the world right here in Australia. And I know both Chris and Pete, you guys are working with the universities. There's some great research going on in both your companies, and I think that's vital, don't you think, Pete?
Absolutely. I mean, like for us, we're not going to solve our mission by ourselves, and you know, we need to collaborate and do joint ventures and partnerships. I think, you know, this is critical, but how deep you jump into those partnerships and at what level is also critical. So, you know, for us, we have an amazing partnership with the University of Technology, Sydney. But when we were building this partnership, we factored in lag times for red tape and, you know, bureaucracy that you don't find in a private, you know, in private business. So understanding who you're getting into bed with is massive, and then factoring that into timelines as well. You know, with us, you know, we've got a lot going on. You know, everyone's quite casual, but everyone's very professional, and as you know, one hat, everyone wears multiple hats, but Yeah, definitely factoring in the benefits of all this, and being very open, transparent, so that, you know, you can really mitigate any awkward issues and conversations that come up for, you know, not bringing it up at the start.
Yeah, for sure. And Darren, I know we asked you this on one of the earlier sessions, but around reading a good book or listening to a podcast, or something that people out there could go to. And some of our earlier people talked about the Harvard Business Review. You know, there's some great reading out there, but what could you recommend to people today around your experience?
The simple answer is go wide. Don't, you know, I don't tend to focus on one particular book or one particular author or one particular journal. I try to, you know, look at all different perspectives, because, you know, again, it sort of picks up on what Chris said about diversity. It brings those different perspectives, and I think that's important just in developing your own knowledge of you know, the way to go to work is trying to learn from multiple others, not just choosing one and following them. Having said that, though, you know, that I think one that I always think back on is Jack Welch. He said the soft stuff is the hard stuff. And, and you know, I think that sort of says it all, that, you know, managing the people, corporate culture, emotional intelligence, all of that sort of thing, to a lot of us, it doesn't come easily. And it's something that we need to make sure that we focus on, because it can be hard sometimes, but it's probably the most important.
And I think the thing to remember too, and what we're certainly creating through all this work with AMGC, is that no one has to be the Lone Ranger here. There are support mechanisms out there for everyone to reach out to us, and we're happy to be connected on LinkedIn or take your phone call. And if we can offer some guidance or advice, feel free to reach out to any of us at any time, and that's what we're here for. We've got some slides to bring up. So Kelly, if you would like to put the slides up, we'll talk about this. And can you believe that that's the 9th way? So next week we're getting towards the end. But today we've talked about how to create an innovative environment and to encourage collaboration, which is to be transparent and consistent. We certainly talked about that. Consistency is a key driver. And certainly some great experience around the table. We talked about consider how staff fit in culturally, and empowering staff to speak up when they need to, or encouraging that. Responding productively to risk taking. Providing continued learning opportunities. I think that's really important. It's you never stop learning. That's for any of us. And increasing diversity. So all very good points, which you'll find in the report. Make regular communication the norm. Yes, that's true. Hold participatory meetings and get everyone involved. Bringing diverse teams together, and certainly Pete's been doing that with Seabin. Avoiding silos and changing the physical environment to encourage collaboration. All very good points, which are listed in the report for you to download. So please do become a member of AMGC if you haven't done already. Encourage your colleagues to get on board with the work that we're doing. It's completely free, and you can connect with us on Twitter or LinkedIn or the YouTube channel, which is going gangbusters. Don't forget about the Manufacturing Academy. We're adding modules to that around circular economy and so much more. You'll find information on the marketplace there around Export Finance Australia and other programs like the Entrepreneurs Program as well. So log in and learn and hear from some of our great manufacturers about how they're transforming their business today. And the COVID-19 Manufacturer Response Register keeps going from strength to strength. So if you are in need of medical PPE, or if you're looking to put your wares onto that platform, again, it's completely free. We've created this platform for the manufacturing community right across Australia. So get onto that website, have a look, and if we can be of any assistance, feel free to reach out. So next week, we're looking forward to some more talented speakers from right around Australia. The 10 Ways report is, we certainly had a lot of downloads, so I know there's a lot of great reading going on out there. So I'm really enthusiastic about you all being so involved. But we've talked about a whole range of things about how to be successful in Australian manufacturing, and our research continues, and we're looking forward to a very big 2021, which right now isn't that far away. Can I thank our panelists again for joining us, and thank you all for sending your questions through, and look forward to seeing you all again next week. All the best for now.